Glib Audiostories presents Guardian Angel by Silas and Pinkleat. A short story. Content warning: descriptions of medical-like situations, abuse, death, and statements of suicidal ideation. Max sat towards the back of his tank. The 12-year-old boy's gums were swollen and his teeth yellowed from lack of care. He shook. He was so cold due to malnutrition and, well, just the fact that it was freezing in there so they could keep the drugs good. Guards patrolled the building and stood outside each of the tanks, one guard assigned to every 2 tanks. The place had a sickly antiseptic smell and everything was pristine white, the walls, the floors, everything, except some of the tanks, which were coming up on cleaning day. Max himself sat in his own pee, his hair matted for other reasons. About 100 tanks lined the white room. Some of the psionics, children, cried out. Others were asleep. Still others banged on the doors of their tanks until the guards threatened them with force. Max's dark blue eyes remained closed as he huddled in the corner, trying to stay as far away from his puddle as possible. And he cried. Oh, how he cried. Father had just finished doing an experiment on his wings, one where they had to slice into them to look at the muscle. So Max was in pain, trying to be very careful not to move them. His lips remained pressed together in a look of poorly hidden anguish. It seemed like a normal day at Kepper, with all the noises and goings-on, but it wasn't. Max could hear yelling coming from outside of the doors, adult yelling and panic. Gunshots could be heard, with thuds of a fight, and a big one at that too. Max jumped at the sudden gunshots. The yelling he expected, well, some sort of yelling anyway, but the gunshots scared him. Max knew the sound of gunshots. The guards used them when they got mad. His stitches ripped a little bit with the sudden jerk, and the boy squealed, covering his mouth quickly to muffle the sound before the guard got mad. He watched the fight gain closer from the inside of his tank, his breast quick and labored, panicking. The doors would slam open, revealing 4 strangers standing there, 2 male and 2 female. The leader of the 4, an older gentleman with a cane, seemed to simply look at the guards, most of them freezing in place at the sight. Those who were not frozen would fire. The gunshots rang out, but didn't touch any of the 4, a black mass rising from the ground, creating a shield, the bullets hitting it with a sickly squish noise as they made contact. The black goo shield would retract. One of the girl's hairs would have changed from a brown color into literal fire that sat on her head dancing around. The goo would go onto the ground, racing forward like a creature going to consume its prey, and consume it did. Half of the forces would be encased in the sludge, their screams growing quickly as they became enveloped like caterpillars in a cocoon of death. The fire-haired woman would giggle at the sight, then hold out her hands, sending fire streaming out of them to burn the nearest ones to her to death. Unable to move, they would stand there motionless as the smell of fried flesh wafted through the room.
We need to keep them alive, natural,
the older gentleman would say, his voice clear and southern as he spoke. The fire-haired woman would look to him, and her hair would change from fire to nothing, leaving her bald. She would seem less giddy with joy, but still relaxed and happy. She'd snap her fingers, and the rest of the guards would reach up to their throats as if unable to breathe, then falling unconscious. Max watched the scene play out. He was terrified, and seeing everything happen, and happen so fast, it overwhelmed the 12-year-old to say the least. Some of the older tanked psionics were cheering, while many of the younger ones cried, and still some remained frozen in fear. Max shook and fell to his hands and knees, and ultimately let loose a wave of vomit in front of him. As more people in uniform moved in, arresting the knocked-out guards, the black sludge would remove itself from the men, and move to the doors holding children. It would latch itself onto the glass and rip off the hinges, opening all the doors at once. Most of the kids would rush out, especially the older kids who were cheering, but a few kids stayed put, and Max only backed up further into his tank, pressing against the glass. The kids would be stopped at the door from running out, a force field blocking their way. "One at a time, one at a time," the 4th woman would call out, trying to process them all. The black goo would be still near Max's tank before one of the men walked toward him. His hair was almost white, and his eyes were completely black as he made his way over. Once he reached Max, he would hold out his hand. "It's okay," he said softly. "We're not going to hurt you." Max looked up at him with his own vibrant, deep blue eyes, which remained wide as saucers. "Where's Father?" He shook, and his eyes flicked to the man behind him, then back to the man again. Max would cower away from the man's hand. The man's hand didn't move. "You don't need to worry about him. Everything is going to be fine." I want Father," Max would cry. He shook his head vigorously. Don't know you." The older man would walk up with a limp, leaning on his cane as he looked down at Max.
"Dear child, we do know your father. We're gonna take you somewhere more clean."
Max would glance around at the pee and vomit around him. Really? But the tanks were safe. "Where's Father? He can take me there then."
"Your father is busy. We will be escorting you,"
the older man would say, leaning on his cane. Max eyed him, trying to figure out if this was some sort of trick. I in trouble?" he finally asked. "No, you're not," the white-haired man said gently. "You've actually been very good and brave." "Am I dead?" Max asked suddenly. "Because Mama says if we're good, we can go somewhere just as good when we die. Jen says that's stupid, but I don't think so. It's only fair." He paused, thinking. I hope she's somewhere good now. The white-haired man would shake his head. "No, you're not dead. What's your name?" Max sniffed back tears. He hesitated for a second. If this man knew his father, surely he didn't really want his name. "I'm number AO100, he said, seeming almost proud. "The first one. Father says I'm the best, but..." He frowned. "Other psionics don't like it when I say that. I think it makes them feel inferior," he added quickly, "but I don't think they are. I just think that Father likes me best, because he's my father, you know?" Max found himself rambling again. He tended to do that when he got nervous. The older man would let out a dissatisfied noise. Max cringed. That scared him. Was he mad? Was Max in trouble now? The white-haired man seemed to not mind what Max had said. "Does your father refer to you by anything else besides your number?" he asked. "Yes," Max had answered quickly, his breast growing shaky again. "Father calls me Maxine." The older man seemed more pleased with this addressing.
"It is nice to meet you, Maxine,"
he would say. The other man would still have his hand out. "Could you come out of the tank, Maxine?" he asked gently. Max eyed the two carefully before pressing his lips together and taking his hand, carefully dodging the mess in his tank as he climbed out. He winced when his wings moved and gulped back tears. Maybe they were going to kill him, he thought. Then he could go to heaven, and he wouldn't have to hurt anymore. That sounded nice. Max just didn't want any more experiments. Not today. He was tired today. The white-haired man helped Max out of the tank and guided him to another person in uniform. "Let me check you out, sweetie," she would say, starting to examine his wounds. Max looked around at the dead guards and caved in on himself. He sniffed back tears. He was silent as he stood a little taller, letting the woman look over his wounds. He was mostly okay, save the messed up teeth and gums, knotted hair, and surgical scars that littered his body. He also had puncture wounds all over his arms, and in the crevice of his wings, a reopened slice that had previously been neatly stitched together. "We're going to get you all fixed up, sweetheart," the lady would say. "You're going to feel a lot better, and you're going to look so pretty. Just open your mouth and say, 'ah,'" she said, holding a dropper with red liquid. Max looked hesitantly at the dropper. He wanted to ask why, but he'd learned in the labs never to ask questions. He did as he was told. "We're going to get in a special car and go to a really safe place now," the woman said, gently placing her hand on Max's back to guide him to the car. Max would feel the effects of the healing stuff almost immediately. As his teeth felt better, and so did his back, his shoulders relaxed. But he paused, and his face contorted in confusion at her words. We're Leaving? The woman nodded. We're going somewhere nicer. You'll be able to sleep in a bed and wear nice clothes. Max itched his leg. Am I dead now? No, sweetie, you're not dead. We're not going to let anyone hurt you. You're going to get help and live a long and happy life. Max would finally start to come to a realization. He was getting out of there. They all were, and maybe he would even see his mama again, and he was going to be okay. Am I going back to Mama? He would ask seemingly suddenly as he walked with her. The woman nodded. We are going to find her and get you two back together. He hummed. Am I ever going to see Father again? No, he will never hurt you ever again, she said with a soft, reassuring smile. Max would watch her carefully. Was that what he wanted? He would miss him, wouldn't he? Even if that was what he wanted, could he really be sure? Where am I going to go until you find Mama? He asked suddenly. You're going to go to a place where we can check up on you, and you can talk to people about what you've been through, she said with a smile. The white-haired man would glance at Max before turning to the older man, speaking to him quietly. Max's eyes immediately locked on the white-haired man. He pursed his lips and bit his nail. He did not like being watched, and in his paranoid mind, that's what he felt was happening. The white-haired man didn't pay Max any more attention as he was led to a nice car and taken to a hospital room. Everyone there was extra kind to Max as they examined him and asked him questions. The boy wouldn't completely understand how they finally found him or why it took so long for a long time, but for now, he was content just thinking he'd found his guardian angels. You have just finished Glib Audiostories' Guardian Angel. Thanks for watching!